Welcome to Discovering. For some, making maple syrup is the best part of spring, and camp is the best place to do it. We'll talk with a few syrup makers with camps close to each other, each with a different setup.
Hi, how are you?
3 other camps have joined in the fun with maple syruping. Somebody needs help, there's usually 3 guys show up, and it's a good way to spend the spring.
Stick around, that's all tonight, right here on Upper Michigan's very own Discovering.
The secret streams that flow beneath the cliffs of colored stone. Forest thick and healthy with birch and pine and oak. Surrounded by the greatest lakes this world has ever known. The black bear's awesome presence as he roams the hills and fields. Call of the timber wolf, the loon's lonesome trill. The eagle soaring high above, the trout lies deep and still. These are what I treasure, the only way I measure feelings that I have for this fine land. There is so much to discover when you're a long-time lover of northern Michigan.
Well, it's that time of year. The days are warm, the nights are cold, and the sap is running. Maple trees store starch in their trunks and roots before the winter. The starch is converted to sugar, which rises in the sap in the spring. Bore a hole in the tree, and out it comes. Sap straight from the sugar maple is about 98% water and 2% sugar, nutrients, and other minerals. Most of that water gets removed, leaving behind one of the tastiest products that nature has to give. Before we can boil it, we've got to collect it.
We got a beautiful day today. It was down to 17 this morning when we got up. It's supposed to be up in the 40s. That's a perfect maple syrup day for the sap to run. Has to be below freezing at night, and in the teens is better. And with the sunshine and up in the 40s, the trees really produce then. So that's the key, is to get the good weather. And if we get enough days like that, we have a banner year. When you see icicles hanging on them, that means there's a hole someplace. And that's what the squirrels do to us. So that bag's got to be replaced. I'll come back and change that. The little bitty hole there is leaking. That's all it takes. Now, did a squirrel climb up? You can see the little claw marks. Just enough to poke a hole.
While the trees are left to do what they do, we're back at the sugar shack, where a pan full of sap fills the air with the sweet smell of what will soon be a fresh batch of grade A pure UP maple syrup.
Yeah, we started out small. We only had a 10-gallon pan. One of my co-workers has a camp about 3 miles east of here, and he started doing it, and I went up there when my kids were small, and we enjoyed it, so we thought we had enough maple trees around we could do it here. The first pan was 10 gallons, like I said. We put it on a 55-gallon drum, cut the top off, and did that for several years. Afterwards, we bought or built another 10-gallon pan. My brother Mark likes to weld and build things, so he built a long, thin stove with 2 10-gallon pans on it. We finally decided we were going to get into it a little bit more, so we put a 60-gallon pan on a 250-gallon oil drum. We cooked with that until we burnt the sides out of that. And then my brother Mark, he decided he was going to do it right this time, so we built a big stove, lined it with fire brick, and built another smaller pan so we can finish everything out here. So the whole process has taken 30-some years, but it's been worth it. It's been a lot of fun. We've got a water bath in the back. We put the sap in here, and it comes down through the hot water, and then we can put it into the pan. So it preheats the sap a little bit, so you're not putting ice cold sap into the pan. And we got 2 pans. The big pan we do most of the boiling in. The little pan we finish off. When this gets down to where the bottom is starting to expose, it's still like 4.5 gallons. And if you've only got 3 gallons of syrup, you have to finish it off. So that's when we move it up into the little pan. But right now we had so much sap, we're using them both to help keep up with the flow we're getting. So our last stove was a 250-gallon fuel oil tank, but we didn't line it when we first built it. We didn't line it with fire bricks. Eventually we burnt through the side. So Mark redesigned this, and it's all lined with fire brick now. A lot more heat goes up instead of out. So we get a lot more efficient boil out of it. When we get down to where it's almost, you can see the bottom when the sap is right there, we pull this whole pan off and set it here. And then we've got a stainless steel lid that goes over the fire. And then we can drain it out, and that's when we transfer it into the smaller tank. And on that front tank there, this folds up, and we got a steel rod. So that pulls out here, and we can drain that and clean everything up. The front of the stove is solid, so we don't have to worry about putting a lid on it or anything when we pull this pan off. And the cleanup crew is at it. Beautiful. Well, we just pulled the big pan off, and we're cleaning it up. We got stainless steel chore girls. What was left in there we've transferred to this pan, and now we'll finish it off, right the syrup in this pan. It'll probably take another hour or so, but that should be 2.5 gallons of syrup when we're done. We had about 100 gallons of sap when we started this batch. So after every time we clean everything up and scour it down good, and about 2 or 3 times a year we'll take vinegar. I don't know if everybody knows this, but vinegar is an awesome cleaner. Puts it on, gets all of the burnt down sugar that caramelizes on the bottom of the pan. Leave the vinegar in there for 15 minutes, and that wipes right out of there like it's clean as a whistle. This here is hardly dirty at all. You can see a little bit of discoloration, but not bad at all. But as the season goes on, it gets worse and worse, and that's when we do a vinegar rub. Yeah, we started back in the 80s, and since we started, 3 other camps have joined in the fun with the maple syruping. We're always here to help each other. We're only a phone call or a text away. If somebody gets stuck and needs a hand, we all pitch in. And somebody needs help, there's usually 3 guys show up, and whatever they need, whatever I need, it's a good way to spend the spring.
It was time for a cruise. Not far down the road is a neighboring camp with a maple syrup operation of a different type.
A couple years before I started doing this, a friend of mine was Rich Seberg. He had been collecting sap at his house, and he had to go to China for work, and he asked if I'd go pick up the buckets. I went out to his place and got his sap and took it home, and I started cooking on a turkey fryer, and I was hooked. I have about 128 trees tapped. Right now we have some issues with water. Some of them I can't get to because the river has come up higher than I expected. Normally the river doesn't come up until after the ice goes out. And I can usually tap some trees down in the lowland and not have an issue with them. But I have this hole drilled in this bucket here, and it lets the sap in just a little bit faster than what I can boil it off. So throughout the day, the level in the cooker raises. So I have to take a break from filling it every once in a while and let it catch up. By metering it in slow like that, I'm able to keep a boil going throughout the rest of the pan, and I kind of contain the cold stuff to the front end. So I use a meat thermometer. It's a remote meat thermometer. You can walk around with it. It can go about 100 feet, 150 feet. I set my alarm at 217. If the alarm goes off, then I've got trouble up here. I might be boiling over. So this allows me to go out and do things without having to stay here constantly. So to finish this, I've calculated out that at 1 inch depth in my pan, at 2x4 and 1 inch deep, I have about 4.63 gallons of syrup or liquid in there. So at the night before, when I get about 200 gallons into the pan, I'll raise the pan up to about 3 inches deep in there, and then I'll shut it down, and then overnight it'll go down and I'll be close to 5 gallons by the morning when I come out. That way the liquid is cooled off. I can put it in a bucket. I take it inside and finish it on a gas cooker.
Oh, okay. I thought it might have been a heart attack.
A trip just a bit further down the road brought us to yet another neighboring camp, again with a different type of setup.
Yeah.
That's why I'm damn careful.
Hey, this is syrup here? Yeah.
The first year, 2010, we've been in this 10 years. We went out there and tapped a tree with Phil, and Sap came around. It's like, oh my God, get a bucket, get a bucket. It's dripping, get a bucket. So it's his fault. But we watched you for years out here making syrup, and standing there watching you, watching water boil with a beer in his hand. I said, I'm a graduate chemical engineer. I can do this. So it's his fault. The first year we had 60 taps, and just this little portion was the original sugar shack. And we'd be in here cooking, and it got to 126 degrees on the thermometer inside here. And then we added this on, and we went to 110 taps, and we added the back end, and now we got 375 this year, and that's plenty. We have a Sap Tank outside. We have an old water sled trailer. We put a 150-gallon tank on it, and we pull it behind the side-by-side and collect out in the woods off the banks. So we pull that tank up to this door, and then we'll put this pump inside of the tank. So then we hook this pump up to this hose, which pumps it up into 2 tanks up above in the mezzanine. We got this tank in front, which holds 275, and you can see the fluid line. There's about 250 gallons of sap on it. There's one in back of that with another 300 gallons. So that's our storage tanks. And then by gravity, we feed 2 evaporators. So it comes out of these 2 pipes, out of the 2 tanks. We'll literally pour it in the pail, and then we'll put it in a preheater, and then we'll just transfer our way as simply with a kettle from the preheater to the pan to make syrup on. And this is the one we bought from Phil when we first started, and it does a great job. It makes great syrup. That's what got it started, was this one here. And then we went over to Minnesota, I think a year or 2 later, and bought a used one, which is designed for making maple syrup, and that one gets fed the same way. We got the lines coming from the tanks. They will feed into the evaporator. What's up in top here is a copper manifold to preheat the raw sap as it comes into the evaporator. Then it goes out of the manifold, comes into this float. This is your level. It's like a toilet float. The level goes down, more comes out of the valve. The level goes up, it stops. So what we try and do is get about 1.25 inches of depth of fluid in the evaporator. I don't want to get it too low, because if I don't pay attention to it, it'll burn. And that's the worst mistake you can have. If it gets too high, then it really won't cook as well. You want to have a very low level. And the reason for the high sides is because this stuff, when it gets close to syrup, it may foam up real quick. And it would boil over, and then you would burn the outside of the pan. You would smell that smell like burnt candy, burnt syrup for a long time. So that's why there's high sides in spite of only having about 1.25 inches of liquid in there. So then it comes in here, and then it transfers to the sap tank. The sap tank has 2 chambers. There are flues into the firebox that are 7 inches deep and 40 inches long. So that's where you get your heat transfer on that surface area. So it goes around the sap tank, gradually increasing concentration, and then it comes out this loop right on this side, and then it goes into what we call the syrup tank, which is 3 chambers. There's a little quarter moon opening down here, which allows it to go into this chamber, and then to this chamber, and then it comes out at its highest concentration. We like to take it off at about 218, and it's close now, it's 217.4-ish. And we'll draw off syrup until it drops down to 217, and then we'll start the process over again. We got to fire it with an armload of wood about every 15 to 20 minutes. And we try and do it as fast as we can, because when you open the firebox, you can lose a lot of temperature. So you want to fire it as quick as you can and get the doors closed so you retain the heat. Because otherwise it takes a long time to recover. This is near syrup. I mean, it's not syrup. You can tell it's not nearly thick enough or viscous enough. But we try and get 5 gallons of it, and then I'll take that 5 gallons. I dump it in this kettle here in the top, and I will boil it down then over propane, because I got a lot more control of the heat. And I watch the temperature, because syrup will boil at 219, but also with the hydrometer, when the hydrometer is full, it starts to float as it gets more and more syrupy, and the mark there, the red mark below 30, which is 32, tells me it's syrup. So I'll monitor it as it's cooking, and this will get higher and higher over time, and when it's at 32, by definition, it's syrup. So then the next step I have to do is I have to filter it. It's at about 195 degrees right now, which is perfect for filtering. Line up the holes. The unfiltered syrup will be coming out now and just priming the pump. We're good to go. There we go. So you'll see what comes out of it. We want a bottle between 180 and 190. We'll fill them right to the brim, and because when it gets cool, it'll condense. I don't like to make bubbles because bubbles stay in it, and people look at syrup with bubbles and they go, So I'll get it right to the top. Robbie Joe will be tightening as we go on. So this batch that was 5 gallons before it was finished on propane, I'm guessing we'll probably make a little over 3 to 3.5 gallons of actual bottled syrup.
After we boil sap down to syrup, we let it sit, and it filters out the niter. The niter is just heavy particles that come up with the sap. So we put them in these gallon jugs. But way on the bottom, the line is about here. That's the niter that's settled out. And why we do that, it goes through the filter a lot better if we don't put the niter through the filter. I'm going to pick that one up, and you can see, now it's a little bit cloudy yet, but you can see the line a little bit more definite in this one. So this will take another 2 days before that clears up, and then we'll pour that off and can that. So we're going to pour this into the pot until the niter comes, and then we'll stop. And then we have to bring this up to about 200, 210 degrees before we put it through the filter. Pretty soon you'll see a little black line coming right there. All the rest is niter. So we dump all into one pot, and as that settles out, it'll keep settling out all season. So by the end of the season, we'll have this much maple syrup sitting on top of this much niter. It's just a fiber that comes up with the sap, and it's it's technical. It's some kind of acid, magnesium and calcium. That's the heavier fiber, and that is just a natural byproduct. And some people call it sugar sand. Ours, for some reason, is always dark. Other places I've gone to, the niter is just like beet sand. It's real yellow, clear. So this goes onto the stove now, and we'll bring that up to temperature. And this is about 3 gallons, not quite 3 gallons of syrup. But after you filter it, you always lose a pint or so. We've got just a regular thermometer here that tells us when we're getting close. If we go too far, it'll foam over on us, and that's a mess. So when it gets to about 200, that's when we run it through the filter. The filter is an Orlon filter, and what they suggest you do is pour boiling water through there first, and it expands the fibers of the bag. And when the syrup is hotter, it's also a little bit thinner, which helps it go through the filter too also. And then we have to reheat it after it does settle through the filter. We have to bring it back up to temperature when we're canning it so that all the jars seal. And we always make a mess, so that's just part of the process. If you're not sticky by the time you're done, you did something wrong. Mostly we make the maple syrup and we give most of it away. You can't beat real maple syrup. We enjoy it, the whole family enjoys it. We sell very, very little of it because I've got a big family and everybody's got friends. We like to bring it up to around 200, between 200 and 210. And that seems to seal the jars up real well. And as we're doing this, the syrup is already starting to cool down. The more people come up here and help us, we hand it out then. We save it for Christmas presents. It's just a fun thing to do. It's just an enjoyable time to be in the woods. It's springtime. A lot better than sitting at home or walking around in Hawaii. Feels guilty. You can just tell, can't you?
You're telling a story.
Well, that's it for this week. Be sure to check out 906outdoors.com, where you'll find the 906 fishing report, TV6 weather, shopping, and more. Thanks for watching, and I hope to see you next week right here on Upper Michigan's very own Discovering.